The European Commission urges immediate Gaza ceasefire and end to civilian suffering. Syrian forces prepare to re-enter Sweida after Druze-Bedouin clashes flare up. And Iran says nuclear talks with US impossible without clear commitment to fair deal. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mana Musalahi, and tonight we start our bulletin with the developments in Gaza, where the civil defense reported that 14 people were killed in Israeli strikes across several areas of the war-ravaged Palestinian enclave. The agency stated that in the early morning hours saw strikes, artillery shelling, and gunfire fired by Israeli forces targeting areas north of Qnews in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. The European Commission has called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and an end to the suffering of civilians. The statement marks a clear appeal from the Commission to halt the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip and to alleviate the escalating humanitarian crisis faced by Palestinian civilians. It also stressed the urgent need to ensure unrestricted access for humanitarian aid. The death toll in the Gaza Strip has risen to 30 since dawn today, including 7 individuals who were seeking humanitarian aid as Israeli airstrikes continue across various parts of the enclave. In the eastern part of Al Zaytun neighborhood, southeast of Gaza, the Israeli warplanes launched a heavy airstrike accompanied by gunfire from Apache helicopters targeting areas in the eastern part of the city. Meanwhile, multiple explosions were seen and loud blasts heard over the northern Gaza in the early hours of Friday. The bombardment came shortly after Egypt, Qatar, and the United States presented an updated Gaza ceasefire proposal to both Israel and Hamas. Negotiators from Israel and Hamas have been engaged in the latest round of the indirect talks in Doha since July the 6th, discussing a US-backed plan for a 60-day ceasefire. In Gaza City, dozens of Palestinians took to the streets protesting severe hunger and soaring food prices as the Israeli blockade and ongoing military offensive continued to strangle life across the Strip. Displaced residents expressed growing desperation, calling on authorities and merchants to ease their suffering. Protesters say they go to sleep and wake up hungry, demanding urgent solutions amid unbearable conditions. Displaced Palestinians from Beit Hanun criticized what they described as exploitation by merchants, accusing them of inflating prices for essential goods such as flour and lentils. Protesters insisted the demands were humanitarian, not political, and emphasized that they are not opposed to the resistance. The demonstration reflects mounting public frustration in Gaza, where a month-long blockade has left essential supplies scarce, inflation rampant, and over 2 million people struggling for survival. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has criticized Israel's actions in the Gaza Strip, stating that the situation there is no longer acceptable. Merz said his government is urging for a ceasefire and the provision of comprehensive humanitarian aid to the residents of the area. He also noted that he is in regular personal contact with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu regarding efforts to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza.
I love tariffs. So, das heißt, wir werden uns darauf einstellen müssen, dass
Syrian forces gear up to re-enter Sweida after renewed fighting between Druze and Bedouin groups. Syrian government forces are preparing to re-enter the southern city of Sweida to halt renewed clashes between Druze armed and Bedouin tribes, according to the major media outlets. Damascus had earlier withdrawn from the province under a U.S.-Arab mediation push to reduce tensions. On Thursday, interim Syrian authorities accused local factions in Sweida of violating the ceasefire and committing atrocities, warning Israel not to interfere in Syrian affairs. Israel had struck Damascus and Sweida earlier in the week, saying the strikes were intended to protect the Druze population. The United Nations is sounding the alarm over escalating violence and severe humanitarian conditions in Sweida. The UN says it has received credible reports of widespread abuses in Sweida, southern Syria, following days of intense clashes. Spokesperson Ravina Shamdasani cited summary execution, kidnapping, looting and destruction of property allegedly committed by government forces, interim authority affiliates and armed Druze and Bedouin groups. Fighting continues, prompting civilians to flee the area. The UNHCR says humanitarian needs are rising, with hospitals overwhelmed and water supplies critically low. Aid items such as blankets and solar lamps are ready for delivery once conditions allow.
And individuals affiliated with the interim authorities, as well as other armed elements from the area, including the Druze and Bedouin.
The U.S. State Department has issued a Level 4 travel advisory urging all Americans to avoid Syria and leave immediately. In a statement posted on X, the State Department cited ongoing conflict as the reason for maintaining the highest level warning. It called on American citizens in Syria to depart without delay, and if unable to seek the safest possible location. The advisory reflects persistent scrutiny, threats from armed conflict, terrorism and limited consular support in the country. Syria's envoy to the UN has condemned recent Israeli strikes as a blatant action of aggression and a violation of international law. Speaking at a UN Security Council session, Syria's representative rejected Israel's justification for its attacks, calling them part of a systematic policy aimed at destabilizing Syria. He said Israeli action had disrupted efforts by Syrian institutions to restore order in Sweida, where authorities had already begun addressing tensions. The envoy reaffirmed Syria's right to defend its sovereignty and urged the international community to hold Israel accountable for its repeated violations. Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan bin Abdullah reiterated the kingdom's condemnation of the repeated Zionist attacks on Syrian territory, stressing Riyadh's rejection of any interference in Syria's internal affairs, emphasized the importance of respecting Syria's independence and sovereignty and the urgent need to halt the occupation's assaults. The minister also underscored the necessity of supporting the Syrian government's efforts to restore security and the rule of law across the entire country in a way that preserves Syria's unity and strengthens civil peace. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk has called for a prompt investigation into the recent violence in Syria, which has resulted in the deaths of around 600 people. Turk stressed the urgent need to end the bloodshed and violence, emphasizing that the protection of all individuals must be the top priority. He called for independent, swift and transparent investigations into all incidents of violence and for those responsible for violations to be held accountable.
Israel resumed and intensified its airstrikes on Syrian territory. In this respect,
Israel has announced plans to send humanitarian aid to Sweida following the recent sectarian clashes that claimed numerous lives in the predominantly Druze province. According to the Israeli Foreign Ministry, the aid package is valued at 2 million shekels and includes food supplies and medical equipment. The ministry also noted that Israel had previously sent humanitarian assistance to the Druze community in Syria in March. And for more analysis, we now move to Hala Al-Hamalawi in our newsroom. To you, Hala.
Thank you so much, Mona. For further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by the Ahram newspaper editor-in-chief, Mr. Ashraf El-Ashri. Welcome to Qnews, Mr. Ashraf. Now, what are the strategic implications of the Syrian army's potential re-entry into Sweida, especially after the previous withdrawal under U.S. Arab mediation?
There will be negative implications because it will be a lead for new Israeli army interference. Last Wednesday, they bombed defense ministry and the presidential palace. Maybe this time there will be interference in the new governance of Syria by Mr. Ahmed al-Shara. Of course, there is U.S. Arab mediation to prevent that. By the report they issued, they confirmed the addressing the issue with the peaceful talks. I think they will not interfere unless there is a killing or clashes between the tribes on Sweida. They have to be peaceful talks unless there will be a sectarian war between Sunni groups and Jews and other tribal groups in Sweida.
So to what extent could the Israeli strikes on Sweida and Damascus escalate the conflict, and how is Israel justifying its involvement under the guise or pretext of protecting Druze populations?
Has a goal beyond protecting Jews. They want to extend the war zone to control southern Syria, even when they have a settlement in the future. They want south, including Dar'a, Sweida, and Jabal el-Sheikh, will be disarmed, and they may control or having a complete military existence even with the settlement. Therefore, Israel wants to change the equation in the south and blackmail Ahmed al-Shara's government. So it uses Sweida as a card to marginalize and make pressure on Syria. And I think U.S. is having coverage for them, although they say they uphold Syrian sovereignty. So Syria will not accept any proposal for Netanyahu to control Syria, which will be blessed by this American side, as they want to aim at dividing Syria. That will lead to more issues and problems in the region, and it threatens with the Turkish president to destabilize Syria, which will eventually affect the stability in the region.
Mr. Ashraf, how do the recent sectarian dynamics between Druze and Bedouin groups reflect broader power struggles in Syria's south, and who is backing these groups?
Of course, there is a great threat on Ahmed al-Shara government after al-Assad's regime collapse. If there is a dialogue, unless there is a dialogue including all parties in one unified crystal, there, including all pro-supporters for Shara, then there will be a division. A group of pro-supporters for Shara made some operations. Unless there is a dialogue and a change of equation, there will be chaos and stop of using. They have to stop using power by sectarian groups. There must be an internal dialogue to agree on a new roadmap and forming a new constitution and a new government. Unless doing this, sectarianism will eat up Syria with all its ethnicities and nationalities and different religious beliefs, which will cause a big threat on Syria in the upcoming period.
What legal or diplomatic recourse exists to hold parties accountable for the atrocities reported by the UN in Sweida?
This needs to be fulfilled equally under the coverage of the UN. We need an investigation committee exploring all the truths, the atrocities by the UN, led by the UN, to explore the practitioner of those atrocities in Sweida, from killing individuals and imams and Druze affiliators. So we have to have an investigation committee to discover those behind those atrocities.
Well, that was Al-Ahram newspaper editor-in-chief, Mr. Ashraf Al-Ashri. Thank you so much for joining us here on Qnews. Now we'll go back to Muna Mselhi in our studio. To you, Muna.
Thank you so much, Hala, for the analysis. And rising tensions between Iran and the US and Israel are drawing global concern. Let's break down the latest developments and what they could mean for regional stability.
We're trying to make a deal so that there's no destruction and death.
Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati continued Egypt's diplomatic drive to diffuse regional tensions, holding separate talks with key international counterparts. Abdulati held consultations with UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, and IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi. Discussions focused on securing a lasting ceasefire between Iran and Israel, preventing renewed hostilities, and reinforcing political and diplomatic pathways to resolve the conflict. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated that resuming nuclear negotiations with the American side is currently impossible unless the U.S. declares its readiness to reach a fair nuclear agreement. Araghchi added that he had clearly informed the foreign ministers of the European Troika and the EU Foreign Policy Coordinator that it was the United States that withdrew from the 2015 agreement. He stressed that any new round of negotiations would not be possible unless the other party shows genuine willingness to reach a fair, balanced nuclear agreement based on mutual interests. Iran's intelligence minister Ismail Khatib acknowledged the presence of infiltration operations within Iran as well as others carried out by Tehran inside Israel, stressing that such activities have existed in the past and will continue in the future. In an interview with Iran's Mehr news agency, Khatib stated that security breaches have not ceased, explaining that infiltration has always been present and will remain so, just as we have infiltration inside Israel. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has announced a historic treaty signed today between the UK and Germany, expected to create 500,000 British jobs and strengthen defence industries for both nations and NATO. In a press conference with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz in London, Starmer stated that they recently discussed sanctions on Russia. Starmer emphasized urgent efforts to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza without delay or conditions. He also highlighted ongoing collaboration with Germany to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza and secure the release of remaining detainees, underscoring the commitment to peace and regional stability. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has affirmed his country's commitment to continue supporting Ukraine alongside the US and allies. Speaking alongside British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Merz noted that France, Britain and Germany are revising their immigration and economic policies. Merz emphasized the importance of securing the North Sea against various threats and agreed to leverage the British-German partnership effectively. Merz welcomed Trump's pledge of military aid to Ukraine as positive initiative. He also stressed that Europe belongs to its people and highlighted ongoing UK-Germany cooperation while advocating for stronger regulations to protect Europe from illegal immigration. Moving on to Russia, where the Kremlin says it is still reviewing President Trump's threat of secondary tariffs on buyers of Russian exports. The statement follows Trump's announcement of new weapons for Ukraine and a warning of 100% tariff unless a peace deal is reached within 50 days. Moscow has reacted cautiously, accusing the US and NATO of encouraging Kiev to prolong the war. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said President Putin will comment on Trump's remarks if and when deemed appropriate. Ukraine's parliament has confirmed Yulia Sviridenko as prime minister, marking a major government shake-up under President Zelensky. Sviridenko, formerly economy minister, and deputy prime minister, secured 262 votes in parliament. At 39, she becomes the face of Ukraine's reform agenda, tasked with accelerating deregulation, strengthening foreign ties, and defending national sovereignty. With her background in U.S. negotiations over mineral deals, she is expected to play a key role in post-war reconstruction. Zelensky also plans to name outgoing Premier Denis Shmyhal as defense minister. Britain's King Charles has inaugurated a new wing at the Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies, marking the centre's 40th anniversary. King Charles cut the ribbon on a newly named wing of the Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies on Thursday, celebrating 4 decades since its founding. The King Charles III wing honors the monarch's long-standing support for the centre, where he has served as patron since 1993. The event drew school children and members of the interfaith community in a show of cultural and religious unity. Elvis Presley fans can now step into the legendary performer's world with the launch of Elvis Evolution, a new immersive experience that opened in London on Thursday. The exhibition, designed by UK-based company Layered Reality, offers an interactive journey through Elvis Presley's life from small-town Mississippi to global superstardom. Elvis Evolution blends archival footage, theatrical segments, and live music with detailed recreations of Presley's dressing rooms and performance stages. The show picks up where Baz Luhrmann's 2022 biopic left off, offering fans the chance to experience key moments like the iconic 1968 comeback special. Visitors are guided backstage through a mock NBC studio before stepping onto a replica stage, bringing the king of rock and roll's world to life. A juvenile Cretaceous fossil has sold for $30.5 million, and Sotheby's becoming the 3rd most expensive dinosaur ever auctioned. The rare specimen, one of only 4 known Cretaceous fossil and the only juvenile, sparked a 6-minute bidding war involving phone, online, and in-person participants. The buyer, represented by Sotheby's Dr. Matthew Hofferth, plans to loan the fossil to an institution. Discovered in 1996 in Wyoming, the skull is nearly complete and of significant scientific value. The fossil had previously been exhibited in Utah and is second in completeness only to the Smithsonian's holotype. British scientists say a new IVF method has protected 8 children from fatal genetic disorders. Researchers at Newcastle University revealed that 8 children have been born healthily in the UK thanks to a pioneering 3-person IVF technique. The procedure uses the genetic material of the mother and father but places it into a donor egg with healthy mitochondria, preventing the transmission of devastating mitochondrial disease. The method, banned in the US, is designed to avoid conditions that can cause organ failure, neurodegeneration, and sudden death. All 8 children, including infants and toddlers, show normal development with no or minimal signs of mitochondrial mutation. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we've been covering. The European Commission urges immediate Gaza ceasefire and end to civilian suffering. Syrian forces prepare to re-enter Sweida after the Druze-Bedouin clashes flare up. And Iran says nuclear talks with US impossible without clear commitment to fair deal. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget, follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EGY to stay informed. Many thanks for watching and good night.